People that work in the wedding industry, have you ever seen a couple and immediately thought this ends in divorce? Why? Photographing the groom and you see his eyes light up when a guest arrives. You look over and it's a cute woman in a short dress. He smiles, walks up to the woman, picks her up and swings her in his arms. Best smile I captured of the groom all day. Marriage didn't last 6 months from what I've heard. Whoa, that's really sad. I agree. They hired 1 primary and 2 secondary photographers to capture the event. Huge wedding party, I think it was like 20 people. They had over 100 people attend a huge church wedding. I could not hardly get emotion from the bride or groom. It was like there was something going on the entire time. The bride seemed really nervous. Groom just didn't show emotion. I did the best I could given what they would give me. Then that happened. Before the wedding. As the guests were arriving. And right in front of the church and everyone. She could have been a lover, a best friend, or a family member. Who knows? It was just really weird to finally see his reaction. And nothing like that for his bride. I went to a wedding where these two appeared madly in love. I've known them since college. They were always acting like kids in love. The passion and emotion just oozed from them. A week after the wedding, one of my other friends said he had sex with the bride in their hotel room the day of the wedding, while the groom party was golfing. He had just met her a couple of days earlier, right after the honeymoon. They went back to having an affair. She got pregnant. Marriage was over within months. Maybe 5 or 6 months. The most odd sequence of events. You just never know what's really going on in relationships. At a wedding when the I do's came, the groom said, I guess. Used to moonlight as a musician for hire in college. And did more than a few weddings. Saw many that raised an eyebrow, but the two that really stood out as rough. Groom was super emotional and smiling when the bride first appeared at the church doors to walk down the aisle. And the bride was more interested in hollering at her family and friends as she made her way down the aisle. I do not think she looked at the groom once on her way down. You just saw his face drop as she got closer and had no interest in even looking at the man she was about to marry. The other, I had heard from the wedding planner that the bride and her bridesmaids had gone through at least 10 bottles of champagne throughout the morning, and all were ridiculously drunk, and to keep playing, no matter what happens. Well, 2 of the 3 bridesmaids fell, and had trouble getting up on the way down the aisle. The bride and the maid of honor made it down the aisle, but had great difficulty. The groom basically was holding the bride up for the entirety of the ceremony, and she very loudly refused a chair. Also, the flower girl looked a little green around the gills and threw up into her basket during the vows. I guess she was either given or sneaked some champagne as well. Wedding planner said they had argued the night before over whether they were going to drink before the wedding, but groom wanted to stay sober until the reception. Bride disagreed, ran into the planner at another wedding, and she said they had a massive fight in the limo on the way to take pictures, which the bride side of the wedding party was in no shape to participate in, so they skipped them. Photographer ended up doing a goofy shoot with the groomsmen, since they had already paid for photos. Bride and bridesmaids sat in the limo drinking more. Showed up to the reception, and the bride was passed out. Groom made an apology speech to the guests, and got an Uber home, alone. On a nicer note, I was playing in a church that was not air conditioned, in the middle of August, and the bride passed out from the heat. Groom caught her, laid her down super gently, ran and got her chair, while someone got her some orange juice, and did the entire ceremony with her in the chair, and him on one knee next to her. Was super sweet, and she cried the entire time. Another time, someone actually did try to do the speak now or forever hold your peace, and the bride whips around, cuts the guy off, and says for the final time, "No, I never have or never will want to be with you. Shut the duck up and let me get married." Kisses her groom on the cheek, and says cheerfully, "Now let us get married." Wasn't he able to get any background details on that one though? I am a therapist, and marriage counseling a lot of times is unfortunately divorce counseling. If your spouse talks about it, go. People wait way too long. When my husband and I got married, we both agreed that no one gets a veto card on couples therapy. If one of us felt it was needed, we would go. Neither of us has asked yet, but it's nice to know that we have that fallback if we need it. 26 years. You never know. The irony is that, because you went about talking about counseling in such a mature way is the reason you haven't needed it. Was at a friend's wedding once. It was at the Justice of the Peace. When the judge or officiant came around to if anyone doesn't believe in the union, to speak up or forever hold your peace. A loud "oh" came shrieking from the back. It was my friend's 2-year-old son. Everybody was joking saying it was a sign. Less than a year later the couple got divorced. When the bride and groom argued over why the groom's mother shouldn't get all money given to them on their wedding day. Yeah, that was a red flag. My ex tried to convince me to let his mum take the money that night and we'd collect it the next afternoon when we got back from our hotel stay. Fat chance I'd let the extreme gamblers hold on to that much cash. My now ex parents were determined to hold all the catering leftovers for us. And everyone who wasn't me, the groom, or the groom's siblings thought I was ducking out of my mind when I put my foot down and said absolutely not. I will personally put those leftovers in my own car and drive them to my own parents' house if need be. Duck off. No chance. Ex parents have a large, very pretty yard and occasionally host small events there, like local graduation party type stuff. Nothing massive, but it makes them a little side cash. They were also greedy and miserable scamming assholes. They had a complete meltdown and finally admitted that they'd sold tickets to a catered meal at their place that very night and our wedding leftovers were the entire meal down to the cake and everything. They contributed zero to the wedding or catering. Not that it matters, but they had no leg in the world to assume that food was this. They sold our ducking leftover wedding cake weeks ahead of time. They had to rush home and order pizza for their fancy catered dinner. They had a big fight the night before the wedding and were considering calling it off until the bride showed up 30 minutes before the ceremony. No one was sure if she would be there at all. The groom danced with his mom more times than he did with the bride. The bride was snippy and nitpicky with the staff all night. The word annulment was cast around, and I hope to God they went through with it the next day because holy shit. A few times as a photographer, the couple were usually fine. The families themselves were too different and combative. This is why my husband and I eloped. We keep our families as separate as possible. His side isn't bad and my paternal aunts and uncles are cool, so they would probably be fine. But having my immediate family interact with his immediate family just makes me cringe. Think hardcore Republican vs suburban Democrats. This is why my husband and I eloped. We keep our families as separate as possible. Can you please talk to my wife? We were both from abusive dysfunctional families. In the beginning we bonded over our commitment to escaping our families and their toxicity. I go to great lengths to keep my family out of our lives. She clings for dear life to her shitty, abusive family. This literally isn't what I signed up for. Why would I want to spend time with people who have emotionally abused and bullied my wife and crippled her self-esteem? I hate these people. I do not work in the wedding industry, but I have a depressing wedding story. I have a friend who I grew up with. She was always gorgeous and incredibly popular with guys and I always thought she was a great person. As I got older I came to realize she was actually extremely toxic in relationships and did better when she was single. She had been seeing a new guy for 2 months when one day I receive a wedding invitation in the mail. Knowing her history, it was a massive red flag for me. I turn up to the wedding and it's at a gorgeous little backyard type wedding. It's spring and everything looks perfect. I greet her family and it's like I've turned up to a funeral, not a wedding. They were all extremely solemn, and when I ask about the groom her mother rolls her eyes and says this: "It's a mistake." Wedding commences and as the bride comes down the aisle her face is grey and like she would rather be anywhere else. They exchange vows while the bride does everything in her power to not touch her husband-to-be, even standing a solid meter away from him as they stand at the front. She actually cringes and looks away when he gets choked up saying how much he loves her. When the priest announces the kiss, the bride takes a slow step forward and presents her cheek for him to kiss instead of her lips. No one cheers. It's just an awkward shuffling of feet and a few scattered claps. It was the worst wedding I've ever been to. They lasted about 3 months before separating. I have a friend who is a wedding photographer, a rather busy and expensive one at that. So people usually book a year in advance. So she had a bride book the wedding date and pay the deposit. Nothing unusual there. The bride confirmed the venue also booked and pricey and had the general discussions with her about the style that she wanted etc. They had regular meetings over the following months, but the groom was never there. A bit unusual, but not unheard of. So it's now 4 weeks before the wedding and they have the meeting to lock down all the details, but still no groom. My friend asks about him, and the bride mentions for the first time that she isn't engaged. Okay, maybe she has a long-term boyfriend and is planning a surprise wedding. No, it turns out that she does not have a boyfriend or any guy in mind, but she prayed about it and God told her to trust that he will provide a groom for her. So, in the end, no groom magically materialized, and there was no wedding. So in that case, the marriage lasted 0 minutes and we were all sure that it wasn't going to work out. In fact, at the time we had some running jokes about her meeting a guy on a date and asking him if he wants to go to a wedding with her next weekend. I work at a hotel. I came in one night to find the wedding was already wrapped up. It was supposed to go until 1 AM and it was 11 PM because the wedding couple had a fight and she went home with mom. At another one they had a huge rehearsal in a fight which spilled out into the lobby. Everyone in the lobby found out that she hated his parents. She was pregnant and she had no idea who the father was, and a few other things. Half the guest list packed up and checked out the next day. They still got married. It's sad reading so many of these replies and realizing most of these couples probably weren't even friends to each other. Amazing. Why do they do it? What is going through their heads? Some of these stories. Holy shit. Quite often because one person wants a wedding, forgetting that as soon as a party is over they re-stuck in that relationship with their new spouse. They redoing it to please external figures, external pressure. You almost 40 and not married. You shame our family, this person is an ex. Do not let them get away. You knock them up. You marry them. If they are very young and or religious, escape from parents' rule and gonna get jiggy every night. Yeah. Boning is a great reason to marry. I did like to think I got married because I wanted to spend the rest of my life with my husband and wanted to celebrate our love with our friends and family. But hey, maybe that makes me weird. There is also the people who just put the pressure on themselves for a variety of reasons. That's the normal thing to do. I'm afraid of dying alone. These people end up in miserable relationships, but would not ever break up, and will even double down by having kids. Not actually in the industry, but I have helped out a friend with a few weddings. 2 of the weddings I could just tell they weren't going to make it. The first wedding the bride and groom hardly talked the entire wedding. It was like they had nothing in common. And then later the groom pretty much ducks off halfway through and went home because I quote he was tired. So he just left his bride having to take pictures with the wedding guests on her own. He never came back that evening, so she had to greet everyone off etc. Funny enough, about a year later I heard they refiling for divorce. Another time was actually last summer. Just before the wedding speeches the groom went go hang out with his friends for like half an hour, leaving the bride sitting there alone and delaying the speeches. Then right after the bride and groom cut the cake he once again went to go hang out with his friends and abandoned his wife. So she was left alone having to mingle with all the guests, and he made no interaction with her side of the guests. He stuck with his friends the rest of the evening. His wife basically had to go and beg him to come and take more wedding pictures. At one point in the evening he actually went for a drive with his friends for about an hour and his wife had no idea where he was. I mean, I get wanting to mingle with your friends at your wedding, but to not even mingle with your wife's family or friends on your wedding day seems quite rude. Wedding DJ here. Had a wedding a few years ago where the groom was a total dickhead. When it was his turn to make a speech he refused to make one. When the bride's sister begged him to please make a speech or at least just tell the bride she looks beautiful, he got up, took the mic, mumbled to her that she looks beautiful, and sat back down. When I left after the wedding was done I was walking to my van with some gear and I saw the bride sitting one side crying. Found out a few days later that the groom hit her 3 days before the wedding and he tried to hit her at the wedding again when she asked him to not drink so much and pace himself. Heard from a friend who did calligraphy that a bride came to get wedding invites and the usual wording of bride mum and dad and groom mum and dad invite you to the wedding of bride and groom. Bride didn't want groom's parents' names on the invite. My mate did an invite mock-up, called the couple for a check, and the groom lost it. Because groom's parents were the ones paying for most of the wedding, they didn't need any invites. This reminds me of my husband's first wedding. No one informed him of much of anything because he was finishing his final year of school. So the wedding rolls up and there's no mention of his parents anywhere. Not on the invites. Not on the program. Nothing. Reception rolls around and his new in-laws have their own sweetheart table while his parents are seated with a few of his friends from school. His parents paid for the whole thing as their gift, while her parents paid for the honeymoon. Wedding was like $50k. The honeymoon was a $2k all-inclusive somewhere in the Caribbean. They lasted less than 2 years. I worked fine dining catering for over 20 years, so I've worked lots of weddings and receptions. I once heard a bride at the reception during the toasts say that she actually thought she was asking out the groom's twin brother on their first date, and that might actually be cute, except she just kept going on how the twin was more compatible, etc. Then she ended the toast with, "Well, as nice as you are, you lines make a great first husband." I was walking past the cameraman at that time and you can hear me on tape saying, "Did you get that? Tell me you got that." I want so badly to believe that this is some kind of joke between them that most if not all of the guests were aware of. I do feel like that one sounds like it could be an inside joke in a prepared speech to me. I also can imagine a bride saying it with just slightly the wrong tone and then no one laughing. I dunno. I once went to a wedding where a friend, serving as best man, gave a speech about how shocked he was that the two grooms were getting married instead of him and groom 1. It was hilarious. Clearly a joke. It absolutely killed, and the whole room was full of riotous laughter. Cut to 3 weeks later. Best man has gotten wasted, hit a cop car while driving, fled the scene, and slipped on some ice, getting a nasty head wound. Groom 1 shows up to check on him, and in the hospital room he had a total meltdown and basically delivers his rehearsal dinner toast, but this time it has a mournful and tragic monologue screamed down a hospital hallway as he was restrained by policemen. So the first time. The joke. Yeah. That was more fun. Edit: I wanted to add that during all of this best man was engaged to someone else. Also, I no longer roll with these queens. Just needed to get that out there. I work in the industry side hobby and I saw it before entering. Recent husband came to me, a total stranger to him, and asked what I would do if I found my fiancée ducking her dance partner 3 weeks before the wedding. I just shook my head and walked away. 2 months. Was working at a hotel during a wedding weekend and the father of the bride and the groom were caught masturbating one another by one of the staff 2 days before the wedding. We all had a bit of a giggle and assumed this was some sort of misunderstanding. There were weird ideas thrown around like maybe there is a family tradition where they hold each other's ducks while they kiss or some shit like that. Anyway, the Baron all still in good spirits and the wedding goes ahead. At 7:57 PM on the night of the wedding I brought the bottle of champagne up to the room along with some other things we did for a wedding night. Normally before they check in, but they were already staying in that room before they got married. I was told there is nobody in the room and the groom is downstairs and the bride is supposed to be out getting photos or something. I knock, we had to even ken we knew somebody was in there, then quickly opened the door and walked straight in. The bride is bent over the chair with her wedding dress over her head and the best man is pounding her from behind. I just left the champagne on the ground and left. One seriously ducked up family, but they all tipped well. I perform ceremonies as an officiant, and no other officiants. The worst IMHO are the weddings that are just a bad idea. The couple is young, inexperienced, and selfish. I mean, even courthouse weddings can last decades. But if you have a wedding that is clearly not planned out, they are often not thought out as well. Weddings that are rebellious as a duck you daddy. I'm 19 and marry who I want. I give about 2 years. Especially if the bride and groom are out of sync with one another, or one just looks like this was the other's idea primarily. Oddly enough, weddings with cheesy themes, Star Wars, Elvis, etc. last longer than the traditional styles. I have theories on that, but do not have enough data that is not anecdotal to back it up. But I think casual weddings, where everyone is relaxed, happy, and having a good time, because the wedding is about celebrating, rather than ceremony, will last the longest. A sense of humor helps. If both the bride and groom are relaxed and silly with one another, those last the longest. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing for more videos.